Welcome, welcome to Compass Coffee Talk. Happy to have everybody join us as I see the room filling up. Come on in, everyone. I see some friends joining us, some colleagues. Very happy to see people joining to hear what we think is very important voice, representing the consumer and holding the organic industry to integrity. As a matter of fact, when I think of that old button was it from the 60s that said question authority? Well, our guest today has been doing that for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Again, welcome to Compass Coffee Talk. My name is Stephen Hoffman. Happy to be your host. Welcome my co-host, Bill Capsalis. I'm the principal of Compass Natural Marketing, and Bill is the executive director of Naturally Boulder. Check out naturallyboulder.org. It's a very cool organization, and there are organizations like it throughout the country. As a matter of fact, Naturally Boulder and Naturally San Diego, one of the organizations that have been inspired by this Association of Natural Products Companies and Entrepreneurship, are sponsors of Compass Coffee Talk, and we're very pleased to have them, as well as Presence Marketing, one of the largest independent natural products brokerages. We have the great pleasure of working with them. I contribute a monthly column to their newsletter. Check out Presence Marketing at pmidpi.com. Also, Allegro Coffee. We're very pleased because it's Compass Coffee Talk. So we're just so honored to have Allegro, which has been a specialty coffee pioneer since 1977. And truly learning about them with their organic commitment, their single origin, supporting economies around the world. Their slogan, "Where your coffee comes from matters," is true. And you can find them in Whole Foods markets nationwide. And, we have a new sponsor, Genius Food. They actually are coming to the United States. Look for them at Sprouts nationally this summer. They do what they call gut-loving breads that deliver a host of health benefits, prebiotics, fiber, gluten-free breads at geniusfood.com. So again, we are now in our Baker's Dozen episode. You can find all these at Compass Natural channel on YouTube, all our episodes. And we're very, very pleased to welcome Ronnie Cummins. I've had the chance to work with and collaborate with Ronnie over the years in the natural products industry. A very important voice as the co-founder and international director of the Organic Consumers Association. He wrote a book in 2020 called Grassroots Rising, a call to action on climate, farming, food, and the Green New Deal. I had the tremendous opportunity to work with him in the founding of Regeneration International and attending the COP21 UN Climate Summit in Paris in 2015, was it, Ronnie, where we finally got them to include agriculture.
2015, yes.
Yeah, which they never really talked about when it came to greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. So with that, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Bill, who will lead us on into this discussion. And again, Ronnie, thank you for joining us, and everyone who's attending, thank you very much. We're looking forward to a great conversation this morning.
Yeah, hello. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. And welcome, Ronnie. For those of us on the call who don't know you very well or don't know your work very well, maybe you could just touch on a couple of points of your trajectory here and how you find yourself where you are right now, which we were just talking to you before the call in Minnesota. Ronnie's up there in the Northwoods looking at Lake Superior. And Ronnie, just, how are you doing up there? And what's your, sort of outlook on things today as you see them related to organic, and how do you find yourself in this situation you're in up there in Minnesota? And give us a quick overview of where you're at right now.
Yeah, well, I've spent most of my life involved in activism and with a special focus on food and farming and organics, and now organics and regenerative. And I think this is a exciting time to be alive and to be campaigning and educating. I mean, we've seen over the past year, uh, it's been a depressing year in a certain way. But one thing that's interesting is that sales of organic food are way up all
Yeah.
over the world. Home cooking is way up. People are eating, uh, better in a lot of cases than they ever have. And the whole notion of regeneration, which seemed, it was a very marginal term back in 2014 at the New York Climate March when we had our founding meeting of Regeneration International. It's now the biggest buzzword in the organic and natural sector. So I think it's a very important time in the United States. And I frankly think we're going to have a breakthrough now with organic and regenerative, because people are recognizing that healthy food, and proper, farming and management of farm animals are the keys to so many things, not just public health and environmental cleaning up the environment, but we can solve the climate crisis uh, not only through alternative energy and energy conservation, but half of the solution is the way we farm and the way we treat our land and our forests. And so I think uh, it's time to move from being a $50 billion industry in the US, or 50 billion plus, to being the main form of food and farming. And I think this generation of organic consumers are going to lead the way. I spend half my time working from our office and our research farm in Mexico. And that's why I'm now the international director. Uh, and with our affiliates in Regeneration International, which we now have 360 organizations across the world in 65 countries who are all dedicated to the same thing that OCA is dedicated to, which is regenerative and organic food and farming and land use.
Wow, fabulous. I'm fascinated by the worldwide approach, and just curious. Do the other organizations you work with internationally find themselves in a similar place that we do here in North America? Are they all focused on healthier farming and healthier farming methods and organic? Is it the same everywhere? In other words, I guess, is the demand still there?
The demand is still there. I mean, the terminology is different. Agroecology is the term that a lot of people use around the world to describe regenerative and organic, and the situation is different. But I think that we're seeing a rise in consciousness and a rise in interest. One thing that excites me among young people all over the world. I mean, we've got about 60 employees in our Mexico operation. Most of them are between 18 years old and 25. And it's really good to see that uh, young people in the global South, in this case Mexico, uh, once they get excited about organic farming and realize that they can actually make a living on their parents' farm, uh, they're not that interested anymore in risking their lives to migrate up to Texas.
Uh-huh.
They actually want to stay right where they are, and solve all the problems, which are enormous. But in Mexico, we talk a lot about, organic is not some modern invention of gringos that we're trying to shove down your throat. Really, it's your tradition of 8,000 years of farming and, animal husbandry just brought up to the present time. I mean, some of us in North America and Europe have developed innovations over the last 50 years that are an improvement over indigenous and traditional farming. But basically, we're just looking at the same things my grandparents, who were organic farmers in East Texas when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, uh, it's the same idea: healthy food, healthy planet, healthy animals, and a decent livelihood for people in rural areas across the world.
Nice. Ronnie, a couple of questions came in. They're really intriguing to me, and I want to lob them at you through the chat room here. Can agrivoltaics be integrated with regenerative ag? That's the first question. And the second one is from Mac. He's from Mexico, and he's interested in visiting the fields in Mexico and supporting and purchasing products for his CPG business. So two questions there, agrivoltaics, and then how would someone like Mac on the call here today get connected with you guys down there in Mexico?
And what are agrivoltaics?
Yeah, I don't know if I know.
I can guess by the two word roots, but I'm
Yeah.
curious about that.
Yeah.
Perhaps the Paula can expound upon that a little bit in the chat room. And Ronnie, speaking of Via Organica, right? Your farm and organization is it in San Miguel de Allende?
Yeah, our offices are in Mexico City and San Miguel de Allende, and our research farm is just outside of San Miguel de Allende in the state of Guanajuato, which is smack in the middle of Mexico, north central, and it's the high desert. It's a climate somewhat similar to the southwestern U.S., where we're pioneering. I mean, we use all solar at our farm. We use water capture. We have all adobe buildings. We're trying to implement every aspect of permaculture into a working 75 acre farm. And we also have a conference center where we bring in delegations of farmers from around Mexico and some people from the US. And we teach people how to go organic, how to go regenerative. And we're on track with one totally exciting. It's the most exciting thing in my 50 years in the organic movement. It's an agroforestry system for semi-arid, arid areas of the world, which is 40% of the world's landscape, that involves using native plants, agave, and in our case, mesquite trees, in a permaculture system that is really scalable. You know, some small farmers figured out that what we've always considered a waste product of the agave plant, the leaves or the pencas, actually, if you chop it up finely and ferment it, you can produce a high quality animal feed that costs a fraction of alfalfa or hay, really good for the animals and costs next to nothing. So this is now spreading across Mexico. And it also sequesters so much carbon above ground on a continuous basis, this system, that with a little over 1% of the land in Mexico put under this agroforestry system, we'll be able to cancel out all of the emissions of Mexico. And I think Mexico is the 13th largest economy in the world. It's one of the biggest petroleum producers. You know, it emits a lot of carbon. Wow. But if we can figure out a way to green the desert, as we call it, these are areas that have very little carbon stored above ground or below ground. But using traditional plants and methods, we have come up with what we believe is a great breakthrough in regenerative organic farming. And, you know, most of the people in the world who are really poor live in rural areas, live in these arid or semi-arid areas where you can't really grow crops without irrigation, and where typically the lands have been overgrazed, you know, in the case of Mexico for, you know, over 100 years. And so we have to restore this land, this 40% of the world's terrain, arid or semi-arid, so that it doesn't turn into outright desert, where it's then really difficult to regenerate it. But we need to do so in a way that eliminates rural poverty and the pressures of people that have to migrate, you know, forced migration, we call it. And I think that's always been the goal of organic and fair trade, that it's not just a question of healthy food and, you know, and a healthy environment, but also a livelihood of dignity and survivability for the world's. I mean, there's 570 million farms and ranches in the world. There's over 3 billion people involved in agriculture, and most of them need to uh, get our solidarity and our help to move to the next stage of organic, which is regenerative and organic. And that's what we're doing down in Mexico. And we're getting inquiries from all over the world about this agave agroforestry project. People called yesterday from South Sudan. We're talking to people in Oman and Zimbabwe. Uh, we're talking to people in South Africa, Central America. Now we've opened up communications with a lot of the indigenous and Latino farming communities in the Southwest. So this is, I only discovered this system 2.5 years ago. It had been practiced on a farm about 45 minutes from our research farm in Mexico, but literally no one ever heard about it except locally. And this reminds me of what we've learned in Regeneration International is like all the things we need to do are already being done in various,
Somewhere.
yeah, it's just that often these people, no one knows about it. They don't have the market support. They don't have the policy support. They don't have, now we're starting to have serious discussions with investors, people who want to solve the climate crisis, but who want to, they want to get a return on their money as well. And with regenerative and organic and value added regenerative and organic, which is so important, we can start to move trillions of dollars out of degenerative investments into regenerative. And that's what I think we're going to see in the next decade.
Well, Ronnie, you bring up investing in this, and actually next month we're going to be hosting Robin O'Brien from Replant Capital and Pam Shepard from Manitree, and they're going to be speaking specifically about the investment aspect of rebuilding and putting carbon back in the soil. So it's a bit of a segue from what you're talking about. The question I have here is, I love what you're doing, and it recalls again for me COP21, the climate summit in Paris, where you put out a call to NGOs all over the world, and we had about 80 of them show up. We all shared the same hostel together, so it was an incredible meeting of all these missions and minds there, and it seems like you've built upon that since. My question, though, is also, as we do this, we know we need to bring larger scale agriculture along. Yeah. And I'm going to ask you what you think of the announcement Pepsi made in April, not only a month ago, literally, where they said they're going to now scale regenerative across 7 million acres. Pepsi Cola, right? 1 foot on the platform of conventional, 1 foot on the train of organic. But this is a big announcement. What are your thoughts on something like this?
Yes, I mean, we have to keep in mind, we got 4 billion acres of cropland in the world. We've got 8 billion acres of pasture land and rangeland, and we got 10 billion acres of forest remaining. And these 22 billion acres are literally what's going to save us from climate catastrophe or not. I mean, I think we can rest assured that alternative energy and energy conservation are moving. By 2030, as I point out in my book, Grassroots Rising, the United States is going to eliminate about 50% of our emissions that we now emit through burning fossil fuels. We're going to do this because, for one thing, it's more profitable for capitalists to invest in alternative energy and energy conservation than it is fossil fuel. So this is going to happen. The problem, though, is that if we listen to conventional wisdom, like a lot of big corporations are saying, and the US government, we're going to be carbon neutral by 2050. Well, I'm glad you're saying that, but 2050 is too late, and remember what young people were saying in 2018 and 2019 in the US, like the Sunrise Movement or the Extinction Rebellion in Europe. We need to go carbon neutral by 2030, not 2050. And there's no way we can do that if we just look at alternative energy and energy conservation. We have to do it by transforming global agriculture. And I'm very happy that some of the big players in the food industry are adopting our position. I mean, Nestle Mexico, for example, came to our research farm in Mexico for a
Wow.
workshop.
Nice.
And they said, you know, we're the biggest buyer of milk in the whole world, right? And all of our dairies, Nestle doesn't actually own the dairies, but they buy from dairies all over the world. And they're saying all of our dairies are having the same problem. You know, it's with the climate crisis, there is less grass and less pasture out there. And we're having to spend more money on grain, which of course we probably shouldn't even be feeding our herbivores grain, but they're spending tremendous amounts for alfalfa, which uses a heck of a lot of water. I mean, alfalfa is a nice perennial if you have water. It's a terrible idea if you live in a place like Mexico where your aquifers they're already overdrawn and getting worse. So anyway, they came, they saw our system, they saw our animals eating this fermented agave. If you mix the pods, the bean pods from the mesquite tree in there, they saw our lab results. Hey, this stuff is better than alfalfa. It uses 1/26 of the amount of water, and it's less than half the price. So they said, yeah, I think we're going to try this out. So they've gone back to several of their big dairies. Big for Mexico is 250 milk cows. And they're feeding them now this fermented agave, and they're doing it under, you know, they have a lot of money to monitor the health, the milk production, you know, the little bulls, the weight gain, and so on. And so I think we're going to see large corporations start to pay attention to what we're saying about regenerative and organic, you know, and we're going to start to see people understand. And one of the things I emphasize to Nestle is that farmers shouldn't have to make a living just from their organic beef or their, you know, or their organic milk. There's value added products that have not been sufficiently developed. For example, in the natural food sector in the United States, some of the top selling things in the country are bone broth, collagen, supplements made from animal organs, and so on. But you have a shortage in the marketplace of certified organic bone broth, certified organic collagen, certified organic supplements. And there's a lot more margin. And so we need the infrastructure all across the United States and all across the world to where people can use every ounce. If you're going to raise an animal, this is a sentient being. We're going to sacrifice this animal so we as humans can survive. We owe it to these animals, not only for them to have the very best life they could possibly have, but to utilize every part of their body, you know, at the end. And we can do that. And the marketplace is frankly loaded with a lot of supplements and a lot of bone broth and collagen products now that are made from factory farms, you know, and the consumer doesn't know this because the organic alternatives are often, well, they're not there on the shelves, or they're really expensive. And so this is one thing, value added regenerative and organic agriculture, I believe is the way, you know, one of the ways we're going to move forward. But the other way is, you know, carbon credits like have a bad name in the US, you know, because why is that? Because there's a lot of fraud out there. I mean, some company says, oh yeah, we're polluting, so we're going to pay for this reforestation program in Honduras, right? But when you go down to Honduras and look at what's happening, you see people say, oh yeah, we cut down all the trees so we could get carbon credits to plant new ones, you know, or we planted these trees last year, but we only get paid for how many you plant. So we pull up the old seedlings and plant the new one. No. We cannot we cannot have a fraudulent system of organics. We cannot have a fraudulent system of carbon offsets. And so that's why it's so important. OCA and Regeneration International, we're working with a group out of New York, Hudson Carbon, which also has a company, Hudson Hemp. But we're measuring to a scientific exactness, especially above ground carbon sequestration in a way that you can't really cheat on. I mean, we've got research now on the ground in Mexico with agaves and mesquite to where we put this information into a drone, into the programming for a drone, and you can fly a drone 50 meters over a field and it'll tell you how much carbon is located above ground, you know, and you could do the same thing next year or in 2 years and you'd check, is there more, is there less? Now there's also Hudson Carbon has developed a system for measuring methane, which is very, very important because the whole argument against even organic and regenerative animal husbandry, well, these animals burp and they release methane. Well, I mean, that's 5% of the methane emissions in the world. But irregardless, if there's a way to reduce methane, let's do it. Well, Hudson Carbon has been able to show that animals that graze properly, organically on multi-species pasture land that's been maintained, they keep their heads down because they're eating grass, you know. And they're also, if you measure the soil, you see there's these methantropic bacteria that are in healthy soil that don't exist in a feedlot. In a feedlot, the animals are just standing up, you know, up to their knees in crap, you know, waiting for the next meal of genetically engineered, you know, corn and soy with, you know, drugs in there. And so they're burping a lot, you know, so, but there's ways to reduce the methane. There's ways to measure it. You can measure the methane in a barn, for example, and then you can measure the methane emissions outside in a properly raised pasture, and you can measure the emission in an improper pasture.
And that's like the myth of cow farts.
Yes, that's
the
it.
Cowspiracy gets wrong, really.
Yeah, I mean,
because when they're in pasture and grass, there's no methane out. It's all consumed by the synergistic bacteria in the grass, what you call the methanotropic bacteria. I remember working on this, calling the article "The Myth of Cow Farts," because that's what people keep saying. It's the cow's fault. It's not the cow, it's the how. The other thing you mentioned a little earlier is the brittle lands in Mexico. It reminds us of the grasslands in eastern Colorado, those plains. I took a workshop with, you know, one of our mentors, Alan Savory from the Savory Institute. You know, he calls them brittle lands where the buffalo once roamed and created the grasslands and regenerated it every year when, you know, they would roll on through. So his method of mob grazing tries to emulate that, working with ranchers to regenerate their lands. Ronnie, I learned a lot of that from you and him. You know, we're getting toward the end of our official time, although the conversation's great. So if you have a few minutes, we're happy to carry on for a bit longer. And certainly we want to get to some questions here because there's some good questions rolling in. Bill, do you want to field some of these for Ronnie? Does that work for you, Ronnie?
Yeah,
Sure.
I like this one from Paula about Bill Gates buying up farmland. Just what's your quick hit on that?
Well, Bill Gates has become the most powerful person in the world in terms of public health and health issues. And now he's decided he's going to control world agriculture. And one of the scary things about Gates is he's coming out and attacking organic, you know, saying that organic is bad for the climate. It's impossible to feed the world, and that we should forget about organic, tune in to lab created foods and GMO seeds and intensify our use of chemical fertilizers. So I really hate this idea that we have to get rid of animal husbandry because I live in an area where if the rural people don't have their animals in a very difficult situation, they can't survive. You know, and there's 1 billion people in the world who depend upon animal husbandry, you know, and our job is to help them, raise those animals better and restore the land, not to say, oh yeah, we're going to have this genetically engineered, they're calling it plant-based, which is a total fraud. You know, it's like I was a vegetarian for 40 years. You know, I probably ate more veggie burgers than almost anyone in America, but these were real veggie burgers, you know.
Yeah.
These weren't like lab created monstrosities that Silicon Valley dreamed up because
Impossible.
you know. So anyway,
I think I know where you're at with the Bill Gates buying up the land. That's good. I think it'd be good. There were a fair amount of comments in the chat. Just loving the discussion, Ronnie. And you've mentioned several great projects and things you're involved in. Is there one place where people can go on the call today to learn more about all of these things or to connect with you?
Yes, if you want to read about, please read this Agave Power Greening the Desert article. It's both on regenerationinternational.org and organicconsumers.org. It's, I think it's the most important article I've ever written, and it's packed full of charts and science as well as the overall perspective. So please take a look at that, especially if you live in the southwestern U.S., because we got 100 million acres of mesquite, for example, which is half of the agroforestry system. But mesquite is still considered kind of a nuisance tree, or, you know, a plant of no value. And but you notice where the mesquite are growing, it's really hard to grow crops, and the pasture lands are really degraded. And so we have a way we can move right in with native plants, plant them next to the mesquite in these areas, and we will soon have a thriving small farmer and rancher situation in the Southwest, instead of the disaster that we're looking at right now. I mean, this is the worst drought, you know, in 50 years, people are telling me, from Arizona and New Mexico. And really, there's no solution that involves irrigation, because we're already over consuming the water. There's no solution with GMO seeds or chemical fertilizers. We got to deal with what nature, you know, provides for us, and we can do it.
Right on. Good. Steve has posted up a link to the article you just mentioned, and OCA also has a website, and you can go there and learn more about Ronnie's work there. There was a question about getting more connected on the Mexico front. Ronnie, can you advise Mac the URL how to do that?
Yeah, just go to our site via VIA Organica, ORGANICA.org. That's our Mexican affiliate, and you can get the information. And people are welcome, visitors are welcome to come down to our research farm and visit. It's the rainy season, thank goodness, has just started now, so it's going to be very green from now until the end of September, when we have our dry season. So everyone's welcome to come down and check it out. And if you can read Spanish, tune in to vorganica.org. If you can't, a lot of this is covered. Use the search engine on regenerationinternational.org or organicconsumers.org.
Very good.
Ronnie is a former Peace Corps volunteer, having worked in agriculture in Honduras. And I also work with our friends at Finca Luna Nueva, who do biodynamic agriculture in Costa Rica. I have got to come down to Via Organica.
Definitely.
So I am going to put that in my bucket list for sure. You know, we've run over a little bit, but I have a feeling we could talk to you for a much longer time. You know, I'd like to maybe wrap this up. And you have inspired a lot of people out there. And what we've heard is not just here in the United States, but around the world.
Yeah.
You've been at it a long time. You're someone I respect greatly and admire. You've been a mentor of mine. You're getting on the other side of your career. Just to be respectful and honest, how would you describe your legacy? What would you best like to see how people carry on with the work you've done?
Well, I think we need to really pay attention to the young people, the next generation, because they're going to determine whether, organic and regenerative become the norm or whether it stays, a sizable niche market. And this is the question of survival of the planet. This is not just market dynamics. So I'm really happy that I'm spending a lot of time with young people who are going to carry this on. And I'm putting effort into things like how you measure carbon above ground and below ground, because I think trillions of dollars are going to flow into this. Once we can demonstrate that this really works, like our county in Mexico, we're going to be the first county out of 2,400 counties in Mexico to be net carbon neutral, and we're going to do this in 3 years, and so we can do this. There's best practices all over the globe that can solve the problem, but we need to have hope. We need to reach out. Those of us in North America, we need to think about the global South. Most of the people in the world who do farming and raise animals live south of the border, and this is where the greatest potential is for sequestering carbon quickly, above ground, below ground, reforesting, regenerative organic practices. And these people are our allies in saving the planet. And so let's pay a little more attention to, I'm glad that the United States is more sensitive to racial injustice than I've seen since the civil rights movement. But we also need to remember that the global South is really suffering at this point, and that we need to practice solidarity and compassion with our brothers and sisters, east, west, north, south. And if we'll do that, and especially pay attention to women, indigenous people, young people, we're going to solve this problem. I got another 20 years left, I think, if I live as long as my dad lived. And I'm going to spend every single day, trying to build a better world, pointing out the bad stuff, but at the same time, promoting the really good regenerative organic solutions that are right at the end of our forks and knives and below our feet.
Wow.
Awesome. We're going to get you to come talk to the hemp industry, because that's the newest crop in America and they need to hear the regenerative message. So we're going to get you out to Denver, I think, next March. There's a question here that says, what's your opinion of the documentary Kiss the Ground? And I would just say, watch it. It's a very important movie. That's actually when we were all together in Paris in 2015 is where we all first met, or maybe you met them beforehand, but that's where I met the Kiss the Ground folks. And they were just, that was the beginning ideas of that movie, a very important film. Also, some really key websites I want to mention, organicconsumers.com. Sign up for their newsletter, Organic Bites. What is it, .org?
Yes, .org. Yeah.
Organicconsumers.org, regenerationinternational.org. When Ronnie talks about things people are doing all over the world, that's a really good place where they share that technology. I love what you say about using drones and, technology involved with regenerative. I don't think we need like a big space mirror. I think we need technology helping rebuild our soil. And again, via organica.org. We're at 10:10. I would say, gentlemen, any closing words? But otherwise, I want to thank you so much for your time today. We went over, but again, the conversation was very important, very stimulating.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great job, Ronnie.
Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you. And good to have you. Thanks for taking time with us this morning, and stay warm up there in Minnesota, okay?
All right.
Yeah, and someone here says, let's, please keep educating our Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack.
Okay.
Yes, indeed.
I agree, but he is amenable to hear us. So,
Good.
All
all
right.
right, guys, thank you very much for today,
Leo.
Ronnie. An honor and a pleasure.
Thanks,
All
Ron.
right,
right.
hope to
We'll
see
be
you
in
soon,
touch.
everyone. Thank you for attending today. Until the next time in June, when we host the folks investing in the soil. All right, talk to you soon. Bye now.